I want to talk a little bit about classes as they are very important in object-oriented programming. Now, if you try to learn object-oriented programming, you might have heard the term classes are blueprints for creating objects. So let's take a closer look what that means. So here I'm going to create a new C# script and I'm going to name it player. And since we are going to create games here, this is a really nice example of how can we demonstrate what that actually means when we say a class is a blueprint for creating objects. So I'm going to open my player script here and I will delete all of these functions that we have here, and I'm also going to delete this here, which indicates that we are inheriting from MonoBehavior. We are going to take a look at inheritance a little bit later. But now I have my player class because, as I said, we are going to build a game. We need a player. Now, what is a blueprint for creating objects? For example, our player is going to have a name, and our player is going to have power, and our player is going to have health. So all of this is going to be modeled in a class, which is that blueprint. So here I can create an integer and I can name it health, and it's equal to, let's say, 100. And also an integer, I can name it power, is equal to, let's say, 150. And a string name, which is equal to, let's say, warrior. So this is what we mean when we say a blueprint for creating an object. Now, in order to create an object, we need to have a constructor. A constructor is the same thing as a function, except that we are using the name of the class. So we are going to say here public player, but the difference between a constructor and a function, we are not going to use a void nor we are going to use any other variable, because a constructor does not return anything. We just use it to initialize our variable. What this means? Well, practically here we have health, power, and name. But what if we want to change all of this? Or what if, for example, here we only have declared these variables, but we need to initialize them? Well, we can do that in our constructor. So here I can use the health variable and it's equal to 100. I can use the power variable, which is equal to 150. And I can use the name variable, which is equal to warrior. And in order to see that this actually works, I'm going to use debug.log, and here I'm going to say player created, and here I am going to say comma health, and I'm going to say plus health, and here I'm also going to add his power and his name. So let me just type plus and power plus, and here I'm going to say power, and lastly plus name and semicolon and plus name. So we are going to see it when we create our player. Now, how can we actually create our player? So now we have this blueprint. So this here, what we have created, this is a blueprint. So we have the health, power, and the name, and now we want to create a player. How can we do that? Well, we have the constructor that's going to initialize these variables, and now we simply need to call that constructor. So we can go in this other script that I have created, this run game, and in the start function, here we can simply say player, and I can name it warrior, is equal to new player. So new player. And this is it. This is how we create an object from a class. So this is a class, and this is an object from that class. And notice we are using new player, which is the name of the script, but we are calling our constructor. So using this new player here is actually going to call this constructor. And if I go back now in my Unity editor and I have attached this run game on our game manager, if I run the game now, we are going to see player created, health 100, power 150, and name warrior. So this is how can we create objects from classes. Now these constructors, they can also have parameters. So here I can say, for example, so I can say here int power, int health, or first I'm going to say health. So health, int power, and string name. So what we can do here is I can say this dot health is equal to health that we are passing. So let me just say here health. And this dot power is equal to the power that we are passing as an argument, and this not string, so this dot name is equal to name. This refers to this class right here. So saying this dot health, this means this class's health variable is equal to the health variable, which is this one right here. If here I put s, then I can say here is equal to s. So this is just an example to show you what it actually means. And now when we create our player, we can add these parameters directly here. So we can go here and we can say for the health, let's say 90, for the power 120, and for the name, let's say warrior. And let's create another player warrior. So I'm going to name it warrior 2. And let's say his health is 20 and his power is 50 and his name is killer, for example. And now if I go back in my Unity editor and if I run the game now, we see that we have created our player health 90, power 120, name warrior. And we have created another player health 20, power 50, and his name is killer. So this is what it means to create an object from a class. And this is how can we model a certain object in a class. Of course, we have covered functions, so we can use functions in our class. So I can say here public void, and I can say info. So info about the player. And here I can use my debug.log. So instead of using it in our constructor, I'm going to use it here. And here I can say this dot health and this dot power, so on and so forth. So this dot power plus this dot name. And how can we call this function here? Well, actually, we can simply do it like this. So we have created our our variable warrior. So I have combined variable and warrior in one, so it's a varrior. And now that we have created it, we can simply say our warrior.info, and it will call that function. So let me just comment this out, and we are going to see that when I run the game now, nothing is going to be printed in the console, which we see here. So nothing is printed in the console. I will just remove this warning here. But if I remove this, so if I remove the comment from the info, and if I go back here and run the game, we see that player is created, health 90, power 120, and his name is warrior. So this is how can we call functions using, well, these objects that we create. And this is the basics of how can we model our objects using our classes. So here we have int health, power, string name. We can initialize all of this in our player or in the constructor. So if you have here another name, so I don't know, if you say, for example, warrior, so now you will change the name of the constructor to warrior, so on and so forth. So you get the concept. Practically using this class here, then you can model whatever you want. You can put functions, you can put here variables, so on and so forth. And you can use the constructor to initialize all of these variables. Of course, you can also access these variables from this object here, but they are private because we did not put anything here. It's the same as if we declare them to be private. But we can put them to be public, and now we can also go here and I can say warrior.health, and I can access his health variable, and you can also change it, modify it, so on and so forth, but that's not the proper way to do it. The proper way is to create getters and setters, which we have also covered in previous C# videos. But this is the foundation how you can use classes to model your objects, and you are going to use the constructor in order to create these, well, objects. And of course, the beauty of it, you can not only create one player, you can create multiple players, as we just saw earlier. So you can simply copy this here and you can create another player. So let's say with 20 health, warrior 2, let's say 50 power, and his name is warrior 2 or killer, or any other name that you want. So that's the basic, or that's the idea behind a class being a blueprint for creating objects. So you can model one class and create as many objects as you want. And after that, you can use them as variables. You can also declare them here. So you can declare them here and simply then use them as a global variable in the whole class. So you can now use this warrior in the update or in any other function because it's a variable declared here. And you can also use warrior dot, and then you can access the functions, public functions and public variables. So as I said, this is the foundation between using a class to model your, well, objects and then create them using your constructor.